Welcome back. This time round we're going to attempt to put the little Apple IIc monitor back together. The last of the components I was waiting for to finish the repair arrived finally. I think I only ordered them 3 times and 2 out of the 3 times my shipment was delayed, so I ended up ordering them from somewhere else. So yeah, that was just a capacitor that I was waiting on. That finally arrived. I've soldered that in. I didn't film that. I didn't figure it'd be very exciting. So I'm at the point where the monitor is just sort of cobbled together on the bench, and we're going to try turning it on and see what happens. So yeah, let's get into it. So a quick look at what we're working with. We've got the main chassis sitting here, obviously with the CRT tube itself. We've got the neck board back on, and the main circuit board is sitting down here. This is part of the power supply here. The mains voltage comes in from the socket, comes over to this board. There's a little bit of filtering and what have you. There's some reefer caps on here that I've already replaced. And we've got the power switch, and then it's switched back out to the transformer, which provides a lower voltage AC onto the main board where it's rectified to DC for the monitor itself. We've got this little assembly here with a semiconductor of some description on it. This doesn't actually need to be attached to the main chassis. The device itself's been insulated from this, so it's not relying on the case of the semiconductor for any conductivity back into the main chassis. And for our initial power up, we will have mains power coming into an isolation transformer here. That's more for my protection than anything. That's then feeding into a variac, so I can adjust the input voltage from pretty much 0 up to about 250 odd volts. And then the output of that is connected to this, which is just a light globe in series with a power point. The idea being that if there's a dead short or anything silly in the monitor over here, the light globe will glow very brightly, but hopefully nothing will go bang. Ordinarily, it's a 60 watt globe. I'd expect it to glow fairly dimly for this particular monitor, because I can't imagine this monitor uses anywhere near 60 watts. And up behind us here, we've got the PAL signal generator that we'll use once we're happy that the monitor powers up and doesn't smoke. So let's see what we can make it do. I've got the power turned onto the isolation transformer, so we've got power to here. That's feeding power into the variac, which is set down low. I'll turn the power outlet on the back of that on. So now we're feeding power into here. We'll turn this switch on. And now we're feeding power into the monitor. And now we'll turn the monitor on, being careful what I touch here, of course. And the monitor is now on. We haven't had anything go pop yet. We're not drawing any obscene amounts of current. The voltage is quite low. Winding the voltage up. This monitor might not, there we go. We're just starting to get a glow on the filament here. And we're wound up. Now we've got nothing on the CRT output. I'll turn the pattern generator on. Oh, and there we go. It's actually looking pretty good. Yeah, obviously the high voltage is working because the pulled out bits of my towel here are being attracted to the screen. So it obviously is going to need a little bit of adjustment, but for the most part it's looking quite reasonable. So at this point I think I'm fairly happy to turn it off and take the light globe out. Oh, that is so tight. Take the light globe and probably even the variac out of the circuit and just plug it straight into the isolation transformer. And there we go. we're back, largest life. Now the trick here is going to be stuffing all of this back in the case that it came out of, because I remember how fiddly it was to get it apart in the first place. Now I've got to try and get it back together. So that is going to be an interesting process. But I suppose we'd better power it down and look at making a start on that. Okay, so I've just discharged the tube off camera. Yeah, I tend to discharge it obviously from the anode cap. I discharge it through a resistor just so you don't get the big crack, and then follow it up with just a straight jumper on a screwdriver to get any remnants. Anyway, let's see how this goes back together. Now, my recollection is that you have to get the transformer in first, which will be easier done with it disconnected from the board. And I think, did it go in that way? Well, no, because the that looks like the logical way for it to go in. Okay, so I'm going to get this in, and I think this power supply board has to go on first. I think it's going to go something like, because the board's got to go in these tracks here. So it's going to be something like this. And then I think our little black duva here, I believe, goes in here. So it's spread a little bit too wide. There we go, it's in. We put the little duva in, that should hold that in there. That stops the board flopping around. And then we've got to feed this up through here. Won't this be fun? It goes that way. The power switch up there first. I don't know who designed this thing. Just unplug our transistor there. And this, that's caught up on the switch. It's a bit hard to see on the camera, unfortunately. But, right, I think we're in there. Just put a screw in it to hold it. Now we can take a look. Right, so about that down. All our wires that need to go down are down. Power switch and what have you, which I think the power switch is on that side anyway, it goes about there, so that's good. Not touching anything. So I think we're okay. You can put the rest of the screws in. Right, so now we can get the, which end will we use to put this end on? Like that. Okay, so I got that on, worked out which way it was which. I'll feed that down, hook it back up on the main board. And that's now hooked up again. Of course, the mains connection onto the power supply board is way down in the bowels here, where one can barely see it. Did I question before who designed this thing? Right, so that's now plugged back in. The power switch. And somewhere here we've got a ground wire. And the ground wire goes on here. I've just got to work out what the routing is for it. Right, the ground wire actually comes out this hole here and then attaches to the case with a screw like this one. Right, we're slowly getting there. What else? That goes in the side of the case, that goes in the side of the case. The neck board will go back on in a minute. We'll work out how to close this thing up. So, don't want to put the neck board on just yet, in case it gets a tug and damages the tube. We've got an earth from the CRT, from the tube itself it's got to go on. We've got power from the transformer. It's the AC into the board, goes in there. Now, one gotcha is that right down the very front here is where this front panel LED plugs in. And if we don't get that done soon, we will lose the opportunity to do it. Fortunately, I've got the mother of all tweezers here. And these are metal, but as I say, I did discharge everything in here earlier on. So I'm pretty comfortable using these in here at this point. Right, and that's plugged in. So now we've got our front panel LED connected, which we don't need just yet, but we will when we start putting things back together, start putting the case back together. So I believe we've got all the wiring, we've got the front panel, sorry, we've got the earth. I can attach the neck board again. Neck board is attached. Yeah. And then this sort of sits about like that. The board has a bulge in it. So much pressure on it holding it in there. It had a bulge in it before when I first took it out. It's hardly surprising. Now, find the right screws. I've only got two of those, but they look a little small, to be honest. But they're not. Right, I think we're back together. Let's have a bit of a look from the top, and whoops, pulled our thing off. Back on there. A bit of a look from the top and make sure nothing's crunched up in there that probably shouldn't be. I think we're looking, everything's sort of looking the way I'd expect it to look. Let's put cable tie on these, try and keep it away from the anode lead a little bit. Right, and everything's looking all right. The earth is still on the neck board. That's pretty important. Neck board's still on properly. Yeah, everything's looking good so far. I wonder if now's a good time to power it on again and make sure it still works before we reassemble further. Might do that. Current consumption seems to be about the same as before. Put our test pattern on it. Right. And it is complaining there, but I reckon that's because of the voltage drop caused by this light globe. I reckon if I do this and plug it directly into the isolation transformer, yeah, much better. Interesting, we might have a dicky connection there on the video input. Don't know if that's my cable or if it's the socket, but we'll have a look at that before we put it all back together. And our power LED is on. Power cord over here, so it's definitely not plugged in because the power cord's nowhere near it. But the CRT is all charged up again, so we do have to be a little bit mindful of that. So I'm not convinced that the solder is actually a problem on this jack, but since we're here, we'll vacuum out the old stuff and resolder it. Well, you know, just because we're here. Right, so we'll resolder these ones. These are just the mounts and the ground. Some fresh solder. I actually suspect that the problem is the contact inside the connector. We might have to do the old deoxit thing with it. It's probably just got a little bit of corrosion on it. These are going into some big ground planes, so they're taking a fair bit to heat up. Not only big ground planes on the board, but it's going into the shell of the connector, which is all one big slab of metal. Right, now we'll vac out the middle. So that's the signal lead. We'll resolder that. Quick little clean up with some alcohol just to get some of the flux off. Just because it's a bit messy if you don't. There's a bit over there too. I'm not going to get too precious about it, but just we'll clean up at least what we put on there. Just a little bit of deoxit in there. Just a bit of a So what's next? We got this base plate thing, whatever, to put on. Got to say, I'm not a huge fan of how close that it gets to the terminals of the flyback transformer. Be much nicer if that board sat down in there properly. And there was no insulating sheet in there, so I'm not missing anything. Does make me wonder whether I should put one in there though. Maybe I could put something like that just under where the where it is. It's sort of there to there and across to sort of there maybe. If I was to put a bit of this on the other side. Now, what have I got I can glue that on with? Not a huge fan of the hot snot, but that's what I got. So that's roughly where this has got to sit. Sort of there somewhere. Of course, having done that, now I want to clean it with some alcohol just to get it clean, which will rub my marks off. That's right, I can see enough. Of course, I should have done that the other way and put the hot snot on the insulator instead of on the case. As soon as I put it on the case, it cooled down. Anyway, hopefully that will do the trick. So put that back on there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They definitely go on the outside, do they? Yeah, they must do. They can't go on the inside. Right, that's got the bottom on. So I think the next bit to go on is our front panel. We'll work out how to attach our power LED. Oh, it goes on that screw mount. Goes on there. I suppose you can get that in with the CRT in there, can you? No, of course you can't. Just the cable's barely long enough to reach. I mean, it's plenty long enough to reach when the monitor's together, but at the moment, it's not. Right, I think we're good. Ow! Make sure I haven't got my towel caught in the seam. I've got this case to go back on. Power connector can come out and that can come out. Jeez. What was that? Something snapped into place there, but I'm not quite sure what. Maybe jump. It didn't break any plastic or anything like that. It's just something must have pushed into place. Weird. Now we got to try and get... Oh, I remember these. These were not fun to get out originally. And I'm betting they're not going to be a whole lot of fun to put back in either. Somehow I've got to get that other one in there. Wouldn't that be fun? Even a stubby little screwdriver would struggle to get that in there. Switch works, so that's good. Now we got to get the contrast. At least this one you can see it. It's an improvement over the last one. Alright, so that's got that back together. Now I think from memory, this goes on, which slides up the middle like that. And that screws on the back. Okay, so Not quite sure how I've managed to come up short on screws, but these screws will do. Like, all the screws I took out of it went into the same tub, and so far I've got 2 screws left, and they're the 2 that go into here when the back goes on, which is this bit. Like that. And then these 2 go in here. And that is back together. Unfortunately, I don't have the monitor stand that goes on the bottom, so that's a bit unlucky, but anyway, it's back together. So I guess we'll power it up in a minute, see if it still works. Okie dokie, so we will plug our pattern generator cable back in, and we'll find our power cable that we carefully put aside. We'll plug our isolation transformer back in and hit the go button. The power light came on, so that's a good sign. And there we go. I think I call that a win. Well, it's good to finally see this monitor back together. It's been sitting around the workshop for literally 2 or 3 months waiting for the parts to arrive. So yeah, good to have it back in one piece. And I've got to say, putting it back together was actually nowhere near as bad as what I was expecting it was going to be. The experience of taking it apart, which is in the previous video, that wasn't a whole lot of fun at all. But putting it back together, yeah, well, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. So yeah, it's good to see it working again. The original fault, of course, is fixed, and I imagine we'll see this monitor in use in future videos. So anyway, if you like what you saw, feel free to tap that like button and throw a subscribe my way if you would like to. That it does help, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.